Okay, so we're talking about the cardiovascular system, of course, and the next thing we're going to talk about are the types of blood vessels. Blood vessels transport blood. We have three types of blood vessels. We have arteries, we have capillaries, and veins. All right, so what are these each responsible for? Arteries. Arteries are designed to carry blood away from the heart. And a really, really simple way to remember this is arteries begins with an A, and arteries carry blood away from the heart. And ultimately, an artery is going to be able to contract and create pressure to transport to transport blood around the body. You have to understand that the human body is quite big, and we have this network of blood vessels, and their job is to carry your blood. Arteries specifically carry oxygenated blood away from the heart and deliver it to basically deliver it to capillaries, and capillaries then deliver everything needed, such as oxygen, nutrients, solute, water, all of those things to the actual cells. Every single cell of your body has to receive these nutrients and oxygen, and at the same time capillaries exchange those things for waste and CO2. Then veins, on the other hand, they carry deoxygenated blood, and they return blood to the heart, and that is the primary purpose at this point. Okay, so let's recap. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Veins return blood towards the heart. And capillaries, their job is specifically to exchange material between cells and the blood network. So if we look at the structure of the artery. Now, the structure is important because this is technically, an anatomy and physio. Intro to anatomy, physio. That's basically what human biology is. All right, so it has three layers. The innermost layer is called the endothelium. Remember, endo means what? You remember from class, endo means inside. The middle is made up of smooth muscle, which is important because smooth muscles contract. Therefore, these muscles, they're very thin, but they're there. And their job is to contract the arteries so that they can move blood and circulate it around your entire body. The goal is to deliver oxygenated blood to every single cell throughout your body. The outermost layer is connective tissue. Okay, function, obviously carry blood away from the heart. It carries it under pressure. Now, if we want to get very technical, we can. The innermost layer, okay, the innermost layer is called the tunica intima. Okay, the middle layer is tunica media. Think of middle, media, M for middle, tunica intima, the inside, tunica inside, right? And then the outside is tunica adventitia. And then, of course, the blood will flow in this region inside of here. arteries branch out into something called arterioles, and ultimately, so this is blood coming from the heart, okay, through arteries. Now, arteries are big, and they do indeed branch into these smaller arterioles, and then eventually arterioles will turn into these little tiny capillaries. And see in this picture here, these are technically, it's tissue, but technically there's a cell, these are cells. Okay. Now, arterioles are the smallest arteries. And another thing is the whole cardiovascular system, especially the arteries, are highly regulated. We have these little tiny sphincters. See these little kind of circular shaped structures? Those are called precapillary sphincters. And their job is to control how much blood is going to leave this artery and enter the capillary network. And the body knows how to control those things, and it controls it with a sphincter. A sphincter is something that can contract and close, basically, close that little pathway, right? So, and it can also open wider. And so ultimately, these are very fundamental terms to describe vasodilation. Okay, vaso is in reference to the vascular tissue. Dilation, think of your pupils get dilated, right? If you go into certain light. And what does that mean? Dilation means that it gets bigger. It gets wider. And if something gets wider, if you increase the diameter of a hose, for example, a hose of water flow, the water is going to flow at a greater velocity, right? So same thing here. Vasodilation will increase blood flow to the capillaries. Vasoconstriction, that is pretty self-explanatory. This is vasovascular tissue constriction. So it's almost like taking that hose and folding it or bending it or taking your hand over it and clamping it down and constricting it, which would decrease blood flow to the capillaries. So our network of arteries, capillaries, and veins are highly, highly regulated. Nothing is not regulated. Everything is totally controlled in a healthy individual. All right, now our capillaries. Capillaries are very small, very thin. They're about one cell. Well, not about, they are. They're 1 cell layer thick, and they're porous. And that's important because that allows them to exchange material with cells. They deliver material to cells and pull material from cells. And this is a capillary bed. It's this network of capillaries. And again, their primary job is to exchange substances between cells and the blood. And technically it's the interstitial fluid, but ultimately it's going to come from cells and from the blood. Here's an even better look. All right. This is a great image to study. And basically what we're showing here is here's the artery or an arteriole. Of course, this is connected from an artery and it's carrying oxygenated blood, which means there's lots of oxygen. That's why it's red. And then here's a precapillary sphincter that can vasoconstrict and vasodilate depending on how much blood will be allowed to pass through. Okay, the capillary. Now, yes, its job is to exchange material What is it exchanging? Well, first of all, here's a cell down here. And this is a very generic sketch, but it's a great sketch because it's very simple to understand. We have 30 trillion cells or something around that number, trillions. And of course, we can't diagram all of it, but this is happening to every single cell that you have. Remember, our cells have the mitochondria, and they need lots of things to run cellular respiration. Specifically, they need oxygen, they need nutrients such as glucose, they could use fats, proteins, any raw material. So this is kind of the good stuff coming in, right? And then at the same exact time, capillaries will take up CO2, which is a byproduct of cellular respiration, along with other wastes, and take it up into the blood. And that waste and CO2 enters the veins. And all of this is going to get returned to the heart. Okay, so ultimately, arteries are oxygenated blood, meaning that they have a high level of oxygen. They come from the heart. And they connect to capillaries. Capillaries exchange oxygen, nutrients, raw materials for CO2 and waste, and send that, and that enters the venous system or the veins. And see how the color is changing from red to purple to blue. And the reason why it's changing is because, remember, oxygen is the reason why your red blood cells are red, because oxygen interacts with the iron that's inside of hemoglobin. So if there's low oxygen, the blood changes colors. It looks a little bit blue. Okay, I'm going to actually show you guys a video on that because it's pretty interesting. I will get to it at some point, but let's look a little bit more at this network of vascular tissue. All right, now the lymphatic system is a lot more complex than this, but for Biology 107, we don't go any further than this information. So the lymphatic system has a big job with the cardiovascular system. They work together. In fact, all of our systems work together to make one body function. Okay, now the lymphatic system's job is to maintain the blood volume. So remember, volume, our blood volume cannot go too high, nor can it go too low. It has to be at homeostasis. It's absolutely necessary. Remember, homeostasis. Okay, so what would affect blood volume? Something that affects blood volume is too much water. Too much water can increase blood volume. That's just one of the things. Okay, so let's look at the lymphatic system, or part of it. And ultimately, you'll see here in this picture, there's the arteries, right? Or an arterial. This is the capillary network back here. That's veins. And in green, see how the lymphatic system are intertwined with our blood vessels, and that is where they are. So they actually span the entire body, and their job is to, if there's too much water in the capillary network, they will absorb it. If there's not enough, they will return or put water or fluid into the blood. So they have the lymphatic system has a huge role in that and other things, but for this, for the sake of this class, we're not going to go any further on that. Okay, now let's get to veins. Veins are interesting in the sense that they have a big job. Okay, so remember, arteries carry blood away from the heart, and they carry oxygenated blood towards the body, and they will connect to the capillary network, where capillaries will exchange material with the cells of the body. Now, the capillaries connect to the veins, and what's being sent to the veins, as we saw in the previous slides, is CO2 and waste. And the veins, look at the anatomy closely. This is how you recognize a vein versus an artery. Okay. First of all, notice that there's some similarities in terminology. For example, the inside is the tunica interna. The middle is the tunica media. But notice how thin this is compared to here, compared to the artery. The artery's tunica media is thick, and the vein has a thin one there, so they're a little thinner. And then, of course, they have the connective tissue, the the tunica externa. Okay, now these veins are carrying CO2 and waste, and they need to get back to the heart, and it's pretty hard to move that blood. Let's say, you have veins everywhere. So let's say this stuff is coming, this is coming from your legs. How do we get it to the heart? The veins have a very specialized system of doing so. They can contract, but they also have this, a valve. See this valve? It is only in veins. And if you were to see a picture of an artery versus a vein, you will immediately recognize an artery, a vein, because of the valve. And that's incredibly important. Okay, so now let's kind of review that. Aside from the anatomy, the structure, the function is to carry blood towards the heart. It's also a blood reservoir, and there's 3 mechanisms that allow that assist veins in returning blood to the heart. Now, when you contract your muscles, okay, that is going to increase your circulation, increasing the circulation of blood back to the heart, which is a great thing, and that's part of the reason why exercising is so good for the body. And they have one-way valves, such as the valves that we just saw. So one-way valves means this. Okay, here's what we're looking at here. These are muscles, of course, right? And there's veins in here. And there's a valve on this side and a valve on this side. Now, when contraction occurs, the blood will push through this valve, and it will move forward into another part of the vein, and then this will close back up, and therefore the blood cannot come back down. Okay, so basically it's this. It's a one-way valve. So the blood contracts, or the muscles contracts, pushes the blood through the valve, and once the blood is through the valve, it'll close. So it can't go backwards, which is good because we need it to move towards the heart. Okay, and then there's pressure changes that are associated with breathing. So breathing exercises, breathing generally, healthy breathing, deep breathing helps with circulation. Okay, so what we're looking at here is blood flow through the vessels. Of course, this is the heart. And let's start with the arteries. Okay, so arteries, this is the aorta, and the heart we're going to get into is very complex. So before we get into the heart, let's just kind of put all this in one big picture, which we have here. Okay, so we know that blood is coming from the heart and it enters the artery system. Okay, and this is oxygen rich blood. Okay, and sorry, that's terrible. You guys are just going to have to bear with me because I'm still getting used to all of this. It seems like this has been working out well. All right, so we'll do this. This is O2 rich blood. Great. Okay, O2 rich blood is going to is in our arteries, and see how it's moving away from the heart and towards the body. Okay, and of course we've already looked at the artery structure and how it's got this thick, smooth muscle layer so it can contract. And this is an arterial, so it's showing that the structure is a little smaller. And then arteries connect to capillaries. And this is a great picture of a capillary because you can see, let me just show you, it said that capillaries were one layer. Why isn't this behaving? Okay. No, that's not what I want. Okay. There we go. Thank you. All right. So see how capillaries are so small. They are literally one layer thick, one layer of cells. And that's not usually the case with a lot of our tissue. So because capillaries are so thin, this allows them to exchange material very quickly and effectively, and it happens by diffusion. Okay, and then of course the capillaries eventually connect to the veins, and veins are carrying deoxygenated blood back to the heart. So all of this blood is you can call it O2 poor blood towards the heart. Okay, great. Now, so those are the vessels, the blood vessels, and in the next section we are going to talk about the heart.